Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another AdvisorShares AlphaNooner. Today, we're very excited to welcome back Whiz Buckley, founder of the No Fallen Heroes Foundation. We're excited to spend some time talking about what he's doing to support veterans through healing that he's found in his own personal life, as well as what he makes of the current psychedelics space at large. If you're out there and you have questions or comments and you want to ask them, you're always welcome to put them in the chat. A good reminder that we take them on every platform except for Instagram. So good reminder to throw that out there. But Wiz, thanks so much for joining. Really appreciate it. How's your day going so far?
Thanks, Mackenzie. It's going great. How are you?
Good. I think it's been a good day so far on top of what's been a very interesting and good year for the psychedelic space. So again, I really appreciate you taking the time. It's, a very timely conversation for people out there. I know we've had a lot of demand for people looking to learn more, looking to understand how this medicine can kind of really impact and help people, whether they're veterans, athletes, or just sort of average people who are experiencing some of the ailments that psychedelics have been able to treat. So again, appreciate the time very much. I know last time you were on, we kind of spent a lot of time digging into your background and your story and how it kind of led you into the No Fallen Heroes Foundation. Would love to kind of, just for anyone who's new, maybe not dig into the entire thing this go, but just kind of give a high level context for, how you got into this space ultimately.
Yeah, I got into the space mainly because of personal trauma and issues that I was trying to find a solution for. Childhood trauma, coupled with military trauma, coupled with heading to Wall Street and drug and alcohol, and then losing 4 F-18 brothers to suicide. I was just in a bad place. And then, since we last spoke, I also discovered that the Navy knew about a lot of issues that fighter pilots were experiencing that they hid. And the House Oversight Committee has announced a hearing into this, that fighter pilots, it's just not healthy, especially naval aviators, Navy and Marine aviators who slam a jet aboard an aircraft carrier. If you sit in your driveway in your car and have a crane pull you up to the second story and drop you, that's the equivalent force. So every carrier landing is a car crash. Every catapult shot, you go from 0 to approximately 200 miles an hour in a second and a half. That jars your brain. As well as going out and fighting the jet on the edge of consciousness. I would gray out. I would, literally fight the jet in and out of gray out, which just clearly the body was not designed for. But the Navy needs Maverick. They need movies with Paramount and big recruiting films. So they buried all of those issues. So I found out over the past year or so that that was probably some things that were wrong with me as well, in addition to everything I just rippled off. So 5 years ago, after my third F-18 buddy, one of my best friends, beautiful bride, 5 kids, decided he wasn't needed here anymore, my wife and I said, we got to start a foundation. We got to do something to end veteran suicide. And stood in front of the whiteboard in this office and was drawing a blank. How do you keep a veteran from killing himself? Help him pay the rent, buy a suit, write a resume. I was clueless. And around that time, a buddy of mine said, hey, there's a group of Navy SEAL vets and Special Forces guys that go down to Mexico and do psychedelic assisted therapy. And there's a really cool group going in a couple of weeks. And, I said, man, go to Mexico and do drugs with Navy SEALs. It sounded like a great weekend, but sure. I clearly had no idea what I was getting into. But, the cliff notes are, it was one of the most challenging 12 to 14 hour experiences of my life. And it was without a doubt the most spiritual and life-saving and changing experience of my life. So I got back from that retreat and I said, this is how we're going to end veteran suicide. So the No Fallen Heroes Foundation, we provide grants to veterans, first responders, and their families, because families serve too. Gold Star moms, dads, spouses who've made the ultimate sacrifice of losing their loved one. They deserve to heal as well. So we're going on year 4. Last month was my 4-year anniversary of sitting with the medicine. And I can't even, I'm incredibly blown away the progress that we've made in the past 4 years. So I think to date, we've given close to 70, 75 healing grants. And knock on wood, we haven't had a single veteran or first responder or family member come home from a retreat and say, I'm worse, or what a waste of time, or, what was that? Every one of these individuals has seen transformational healing.
Think again, fantastic for you to be able to take something that personally, positively, really had a strong positive impact in your life, be able to bring it to people who are struggling with much of the same things, like you're saying, because, obviously working in the military, it's incredibly trying, whether it's physical or kind of mental and the things that you have to go through. I think being able to provide some relief ultimately makes a huge difference. I know you obviously have a relationship with Daniel Carcillo, who kind of on the athlete side, very different obviously, but a lot of the same things, being able to kind of speak the same language and being able to
Hmm.
directly kind of help and benefit people that have been through similar things, and especially where, it seems like maybe the institutions that might have caused some of the harm in some ways have kind of, underplayed some of the harm or sort of not really attended to trying to ultimately help and repair some of the damage done. That does
Yeah,
seem like maybe it's changing, but we'll see.
yeah.
Yeah.
So Mackenzie, the first 2 years of the No Fallen Heroes Foundation, I was infuriated. I was getting on an airliner to take heroes who incurred trauma serving this one to Mexico, to Costa Rica. My mission objective, day one of this foundation, was to heal our heroes at home. So thank you to the great voters in the states of Oregon, Colorado, New Mexico, Governor Abbott with the $50 million Ibogaine initiative a couple weeks ago. So 2 years ago, we started hitting that mission objective of healing our heroes at home, using Daniel's Place out in Oregon, using 2 retreat centers out in Colorado. So we're finally starting to heal our heroes at home, which is just puts a huge smile on my face.
That's great. Well, I was going to say also congratulations on 4 years. I think it's, difficult work. I know and imagine, but to be able to do that, and for each individual person you help, I know that makes a huge impact in their lives and their families and in their community. There's that big ripple effect.
Yeah.
I was going to ask kind of how that's changed over these 4 years, and it seems like that's a big element, is being able to provide that relief here at home. What does that mean for people who are kind of getting these grants and finding these treatments to do that here versus, other countries or having to take a trip
Yeah.
out?
Yep. Well, I hate talking like this, but I will as a businessman and as a chairman of a foundation. When I
Sure.
went to Mexico 4 years ago, ibogaine treatment was $3,500. Not going to name the retreat center, but
Sure.
today that same treatment is anywhere from $7,500 to $10,000.
Jeez Louise.
Now, I those are for-profit retreat centers, folks. Let me be clear. I am not a for-profit. I'm a nonprofit. So it's
Mhm.
a little heartbreaking to me. I get it's on Rogan. I get it's on the New York Times. It's in the zeitgeist. But let's just say that, um, I think Daniel's Place in Oregon for veterans, about $2,500. So it breaks my heart that I have to talk like this. But I'm like, hey, if I can heal 3 veterans for the price of one, we're going to utilize clinics here in the United States and psilocybin. Now, I've done my heroic dose of psilocybin. I don't go anywhere or do any medicines that I have not been at or I have not done. I'm an ibogaine guy. I My psilocybin journey was absolutely incredible, and we can, that's its own conversation. But
Sure.
um, I was a drinker. I don't know if you can be a good drinker. I was a bad drinker.
Hmm.
And up to close to a year after sitting with the ibogaine, I could not look at or smell alcohol. It made me physically ill. I
Yeah.
don't see the similar anti-addictive properties with psilocybin. Ibogaine is
Hmm.
a thermonuclear weapon for addiction. Coffee, tobacco, porn, heroin, alcohol. It's an addiction interrupter. It's not a cure. It'll interrupt your addiction. I mean, there was a study on ibogaine years ago with heroin addicts. 85% of heroin addicts, after a single dose of ibogaine, never even looked at this stuff again. They ended the study 3 years later because they're like, if you go back to doing heroin after 3 years of not doing it, it's not the ibogaine.
Sure.
It gave you a new lease on life. And
Hmm.
these people woke up the next morning, wanted breakfast. I mean, they're like, I haven't eaten breakfast in years. I'm not shaking. I'm not going through these withdrawals. So sadly, I'm an ibogaine guy. I think it is the medicine, but these clinics are actually pricing us out of being able to sit with ibogaine. And I get some of the clinics are like, well, we'll work a deal with you and stuff like that. But still, man, I mean, we're also using a spiritual retreat center outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma, called Rising Ridge. They operate under a church type of thing, and they're about $1,250 for an incredible heroic dose of psilocybin, some combo, some hape, and Senior Chief Napier does an incredible job in Oklahoma. So, to my brothers and sisters south of the border, you better get while the getting's good, because we need to start doing ibogaine here in the United States. And I get it. The ibogaine has the potential to lower your heart rate a little bit, right? Or some sort of arrhythmia in between heartbeats. I defer to the lab coat folks. Sure. So I get it. They do EKG screening. You're on an EKG throughout the night. The places now do a magnesium drip, which can essentially negate that potential heart issue. There was a cardiologist that slipped downstairs when, we were going through the medicine. I think there was an ALS in the driveway. So I get the expenses are a little higher, but they certainly didn't need to double or quadruple over the past 4 years. So, sadly, it's a business. Even though we're talking about the healing space, it's a business, man. And there are folks that are actively taking advantage of that.
I feel like that has to be hard just to see, because I think you recognize how much good it can do when people can have access to it. And I think putting up barriers, whether that's price barriers or distance barriers, is difficult to see ultimately. Correct. But I hope the silver lining is that does mean that more people are interested in it. More people are kind of seeing it as an option for healing. And that's why they're kind of able to drive those prices up. Again, we'll see. And maybe in this.
Yeah. So, I hate talking like this, but it's ibogaine's almost turning into a little bougie, right? A lot of these clinics are like, hey man, we're booked until the fall, call us back later type of thing. And really? Would they rather help a veteran for, a discount, or somebody from LA who they can charge 15 grand? So I'm a little jaded with some of these folks and in the ibogaine space, and I'm not digging it. So I did join the advisory board for a company called Demerex. So Dr. Deborah Mash has been working with ibogaine since the early 90s. I mean, she is literally her call sign is the queen of ibogaine. You should have Dr. Mash on. She's the 500-pound head in the space. Mm-hmm. And they are coming out with neuribogaine. So ibogaine is my 12 to 14 hour hanging with God, my sister, my father, healing everything. Mm-hmm. In the liver, in an ibogaine journey, it produces something called noribogaine. So noribogaine is the anti-addictive grenade that's going to go in and take everything out. Noribogaine, it isn't a 12 to 14 hour journey. It can literally be the medicine, the anti-addictive medicine. So at Demerex, I think the current numbers are like 39 million Americans suffer from AUD, alcohol use disorder. A regime of this medicine, not going to Mexico, not lying on your back on a mattress, getting your rear end kicked, could potentially cure alcohol use disorder in the United States. And I know a ton of veterans who have drinking problems. So I'm excited that there are folks out there who are actually looking at these things as a way to really heal people. And I joined the board of Demerex to be that critical eye, like, hey man, how about this? We have a corporate giving program that is free to veterans or first responders or family members who are experiencing AUD. So I'm going into some of these organizations to be that advocate. We can talk about Secretary Collins in a little bit, but in a fighter pilot debrief, we have a saying: if you're going to throw a knife, make sure there's a note attached to it. So I just don't sit and criticize. I sit, and if I'm going to criticize, I'm coming with action items and recommended courses of action. So there are some, good, even publicly traded psychedelic companies out there doing some good work. MindMed, MM120. I've heard through the grapevine that the FDA reached out to these companies. And usually when you hear from the FDA, if you're one of these companies, that's never a good thing. Sure. This is a different administration. So the last FDA commissioner, denied MDMA and Lykos and all that stuff. This FDA commissioner publicly said 3 weeks ago, psychedelics are a priority for this administration. It could not be any more night and day. And I was actually up in DC at the Federal Summit on psychedelic medicine. when President Trump nominated the new Surgeon General. And the lady said, I love psilocybin. I love these medicines. Psilocybin helped me and helped me find love in my life. I mean, I'm absolutely blown away by some of the developments that are going on.
I was going to say, ultimately, is that ultimately better than you ever could have hoped in terms of, a policy and sort of, I don't know, tone,
Yeah.
I guess, and timbre for.
So I'm going to be honest. I got it wrong. I thought Democrats, mala beads, drug rugs, anti-war. I thought the Democrats were already there on psychedelics. Wrong. I stopped going to DC probably 3 years ago because it was incredibly frustrating. I remember, and I don't need to name names, but a congressman from Florida, an appropriator, behind closed doors looked at me. He said, "Whiz, I love what you're doing." And I'm like, "Okay, great." He's like, "No, well, you're going to have a problem with the big pharma and the alcohol and tobacco folks." I looked at him. I'm like, "Isn't that your job? What are you talking about? I'm going to have a problem." So when in the past 4 years, and I don't like getting too political, but these are facts. I thought they were there. I thought Joe, Kamala, Democrats, they can't be more pro psychedelic.
Sure.
Wrong. They were 100% in bed with Big Pharma. I never thought there would be a snowball's chance in hell that Republicans would be the ones that are like, wait a minute, these medicines can help heal our veterans. Why aren't we using them? So let's dig into my visit last month with up to DC. I was going up for the federal summit on psychedelic medicine anyway, but I had a calendar reminder on my cell phone. I Googled what's the 100th day of the administration and that date. If I hadn't heard a word, good words about psychedelics, I was gonna throw a knife with a note attached, and I did on the 100th day at Secretary Collins, and shockingly, he responded to me. And he said, "Hey, this is a top priority, and we're kind of doing our best." I'm like, "Wow, didn't expect that." Woke up the next morning to not expecting a direct message from the secretary. So he reached out to me directly and said, "Whiz, I'm telling you, this is a priority. Here's the contact info for my chief, of staff or whatever it was. Please reach out to her because we need your help and we want to kind of get you on board," type of thing. So I was blown away. He said, "I've looked into what you're doing and we appreciate it." I thought that was enough to be blown away. That next day in a cabinet meeting, and in my 57 years on this planet, so at that cabinet meeting, at least one network was covering it live. They all got to go around and do their "look at me, I'm great" speech for about a minute or two.
Sure.
To be honest with you, I don't like the optics of that. It was turning me off until Secretary Collins gave his 2-minute, everything's great type of thing. And Trump leaned forward and said, "What's going on with veteran suicide?" I about fell on the floor. I about fell out of my chair. There's no way in hell. I've never heard a president say the words veteran suicide, let alone publicly, in a cabinet meeting to the VA secretary. I was blown away. If that blew me away, the answer, my wife came running in here. She thought I was having a heart attack. I was yelling because the secretary said, "Mr. President, we are throwing a ton of money at veteran suicide and it ain't working. The numbers are either staying the same or they're going up. But there are nonprofits out there doing some good work potentially with these medicines. We're going to look into them and make sure they're safe and everything, but they show a lot of promise." He didn't say no fallen heroes, but I clearly I was on top of the guy's mind from him reaching out to me the day before. So man, I was just absolutely stunned. So the chief of staff reached out to me and I said, "Hey, I'm actually going to be in DC next week because she said, 'Hey, can we jump on a call today?' I'm like, 'I'll be up there in a couple of days if you'd like to meet in person.' She's like, 'Even better.'" So it was almost 4 years to the day that I crossed the border. Now I'm crossing the Beltway. I mean, I walked into the VA that day, not as a protester or a patient, but as an advocate, right up to the 10th floor. And I'm sitting there in a meeting with these heavies at the VA overlooking the White House. I mean, it was a very surreal moment. Halfway through, it was about 20 minutes in, she grabbed her phone and she was still listening to me intently, but she was like texting. I'm like, well, that's rude. I wouldn't do that to somebody.
Sure.
In hindsight, I know what she was doing. I think they were making sure I wasn't a complete idiot or some sort of nut, because after she put her phone down, like a minute later, the secretary came in. So I think they were doing a little check first. He walked in and he said, yeah, he said, Whiz, I heard you were in the building. I have to shake your hand. I got to meet you. I'm like, well, feelings mutual, Mr. Secretary. I'd like to meet you too. We had a great conversation. He looked me. I gave my foundation coin, and he said, Whiz. He looked me right in the eyes. He said, Whiz, if anybody's going to do this, it will be us. And if it's going to happen, it's going to be now. And it was a not so subtle jab at the last 4 years of nothing. And I told him, I said, well, Mr. Secretary, I'm going to hold you to that. And he's like, well, I expect nothing less. Clearly, you reaching out and hold us to account. I'm like, well, I will. And I gave him some immediate action items. I don't know if he asked or I volunteered it. I don't know if he said, well, what do you got? Whatever, however it worked, I hit him with them like vouchers. The most immediate thing you could do today, today, I don't know how this whole place works, but this doesn't sound like it could be too hard. If a young woman or man who served this country comes out of pocket, they come out of pocket $2,500 to go to Oregon, which is a lot of money. I don't see any of them coming out of pocket $7,500 to go to Mexico, but we already talked about that. Why can't they send you that receipt and you cut them a check, man? Do you know how much money that's saving the VA ultimately, that they're potentially healed? Or they're, when I went with Marcus Luttrell was on 15 medications, 5 to wake up, 5 for lunch, 5 to go to bed. Marcus hasn't taken a single medication in 4 years. So, Mr. Secretary, if a veteran comes out of pocket for this healing, why can't you cut him a check and reimburse them? And he, I could see the gears turning. He's like, and I said, I didn't have the numbers in front of me. I said, I don't know, $500,000, $750,000. I said, our foundation has given X amount of grants so far. I got all the paperwork. I can show you our receipts. If you cut us a check today for that amount of money, do you know we could probably clear the next quarter to a half of our list immediately? So he was digging that. He was digging the voucher idea. And I said, this way, you got a little bit of a Heisman. You got a little bit of a stiff arm. You're not paying a clinic. So somebody in this town goes, oh, that's a Schedule 1 and it's a felony. How is the VA legally? You're reimbursing a veteran for coming out of pocket. So you're not, that gives you an extra layer of protection here. And, I was a little bit more pointed too. I said, Mr. Secretary, you might know the numbers better than me, but call it 17, 22, 44. I don't care. That's a mass shooting. If, God forbid, 22 children, not once a year, but were being shot every day in a school, this country would flip the hell out. Even the pro-gun nuts would be like, holy crap, we got to do something. But since it's 22 veterans a day, we just kind of, thank you for your service. Let's, we'll try and figure something out. Wrong. I said, the president for the past couple months, I think he's got a printer next to his desk that is flying executive orders out. The guy has a massive cigar box of pens. Why can't he? I didn't say this at the time. It was one of those later in the day. I'm like, I needed to say this, but could you imagine if President Trump heard that veterans were going to Mexico for this treatment? That guy would probably flip out. Why can't he grab one of those things off the printer and sign it, either rescheduling these things, not legal, make them Schedule 3, make them ketamine, man, but do something. The fact that these medicines are still Schedule 1, which is no therapeutic use and a high risk of addiction, that's the definition of alcohol and a cigarette. Those are 100% legal. Psilocybin, ibogaine, it's a felony. I told him that. I did tell him this. I'm like, I got to be honest, Mr. Secretary, when I was coming to DC, those people down the street would say, I love it, Whiz, you need to go talk to the VA. When I talk to you all, you point to them and say, somebody needs to go talk to the lawmakers. We can only do, I'm like, this is a circular firing squad, man. It's stupid. Who is in the middle of the circle who can stand up and go, get it done. And clearly that's the president. But, Secretary Collins did tell me, he's like, Wiz, I talked to Secretary Kennedy, and man, he really shifted my opinion. All the stuff you're doing is helping. But when I sat and had a heart to heart with him about his son after his wife, after his mom took his life, he's like, that really, Secretary Kennedy's a great guy. And so I've never been more bullish. I mean, we had then Senator Vance, but now Vice President, on Rogan. Joe Rogan gave him a 12 to 15-minute brief on psychedelics for veterans. To his credit, the then senator's like, man, I didn't know about any of this stuff. And people criticize that. I'm like, at least he was honest. And after Rogan gave him a brief, he said, well, I don't get it. Why aren't we doing this for our veterans? Pete Hegseth, November 7th, I think. He wasn't nominated yet for SecDef, but he was on the Sean Ryan podcast. Sean Ryan did the same medicines I did at the same place. And Pete Hegseth said, well, I haven't done the medicine, but I've heard a lot of my bros and sisters who have, and they're healed. Why aren't we doing this? Then you had RFK running for president, gave that, little beautiful talk about when he was asked, what do you think about psychedelics? And he said, man, I'm a recovering heroin addict and alcoholic. It sounded like dumb to me, but my wife took her life in 2012 and one of my sons was done. I was convinced he was next, but he took him to Peru, came home. When I saw him get off the airplane, I knew I had my son back. So we have all these people in the administration who have been very publicly pro-psychedelic. Let's go. What's the next push? I really do believe if somebody can get to President Trump and say, hey, do you know that guys are having to go to Mexico? He would flip out, man. I think this would be legal within a minute. He'd tweet, as of right now, you could do these medicines in America. I heard guys are going to Mexico. That's ridiculous. Somebody needs to get to him. I'd love to, but maybe somebody watching, if you know President Trump, please let me know.
Yeah, no, but again, I think the work that you're doing in those meetings that you're having, even on those levels that aren't necessarily with the president himself, is hugely important. And I think that knowledge and information and kind of interest does trickle up, hopefully, I would imagine. And I do think you're right. It's in line with sort of the patriotism, the caring for veterans, all those things that seem very important in terms of this administration. So I'd imagine that works itself out. You would hope. Again, it seems like a very urgent issue.
Exactly. Yeah, you're right, though. I mean, it's in the zeitgeist. People are. It's a hot topic at Mar-a-Lago. It's gotta float up to the man. Sadly, like 8 months ago, we hired a PR firm for our foundation to try and help us get the word out.
Yeah.
And I was, hoping to do some media appearances, and then all these airliners started crashing. So they reached out and said, like, well, wait, this guy was an airline pilot and a fighter pilot. Can you talk about this stuff? They're like, yeah. So I've done all these media hits, sadly, for months, and then recent ones for the Israel and Iran conflict here. So we have been prepping the battlefield with a lot of the producers. So when we can pull on the string, like, hey, by the way, this guy does all the psychedelic stuff, because I know the president watches Fox News. He watches all these media things. Yeah. If we can get in front of him with this message of our heroes are in a bad place, and you with the stroke of a pen could help save lives today, I think he'd do it. I mean, he seems like a guy that when presented with something critical, he acts. So yeah. we'll get there.
A clear story with a pretty, not simple solution, but at least a path towards a much better environment, a much better world for veterans in general. And I think just generally people who are struggling again with mental health or just sort of a variety of issues, whether again, they're athletes or veterans. But again, I think that's very much in the sweet spot for this.
Yeah, I mean,
should be.
Secretary Collins nailed it. He's like, we're throwing money at the problem and it's not working. We have a saying in the military, when in a hole, cease digging. Stop doing what we're currently doing. How about step one? And unless me, Marcus, unless the thousands, probably tens of thousands of veterans, first responders, or family members who have healed with these medicines are all lying, let's just assume we're kind of telling the truth. We should be doing this yesterday. We should have done it years ago, but there's clearly something here. And I get it. All these anecdotal stories like mine or all these other people, they're exactly that. They're what happened to me, and they're anecdotal. A lot of these folks in DC, man, they need Excel sheets, they need reports, they need data. So that's why it's critical, MindMed or Cybin or Atai or any of these companies. That's why I think the FDA reached out to them recently and said, what do you need from us to speed things? Well, let's go, folks. Rarely does the FDA reach out and go, can we help speed this up?
Sure.
So that's great news to me.
Yeah, again, I think it is true ultimately that some of them are anecdotes, but I do think as these companies are putting up data and are putting out true research, I do think that all kind of comes together, like you're saying, to build momentum. And then maybe
Yeah,
we do see some rescheduling, which again would open things up for more research, for more testing, for more sort of the medical side of things. So hopefully we
correct.
see that at some point soon. But it does feel like it's one of those things that if you have, again, it's not a magic bullet entirely. I think it does take a lot of other things around it to kind of find that healing, but it can be at least a way to kind of find a breath to get to a place where you can get into healing.
Yeah.
But I think it's hard to ignore that over time. I would imagine that kind of pushes through in the end.
I tell people, radical trauma might need radical healing.
Yeah.
These medicines are absolutely radical healing. Let me be blindingly clear since I didn't say this already. These medicines are not for everyone. There are so many different healing modalities: yoga, hot yoga, breath work, meditation, walking on the beach, climbing a mountain in Nepal. There are so many different healing modalities. This is one of them. It's not recreational, it's not fun, and there's a lot of work. And it's interesting because people that do think it is, the magic pill. It's the exact opposite, folks. It's when you do this healing, it's not all sunshine and lollipops. Matter of fact, it breaks down a lot of what you thought you knew to be true for 52 years for me. So when you get home, we call it putting in the work. You got to do your calls with your guide. You got to do your calls with your squadron mates that you sat with the medicine. Otherwise, it was a pretty incredible or crazy or wild experience. And if you don't unpack it, there could be some issues. Every one of the people we've helped, it has been transformative. There absolutely has been people who have come home and it was a struggle. When you come home with a clean piece of paper, I mean, my wife was like, you're the guy I met in college. This is crazy. If you go back to the things that that made you sick, I'll delete the word. You got to change. You got to change a lot of things. If you go back to old habit patterns, you're going to be in a dogfight. It's going to be tough. But even the people who came in and had a little dogfight as they got home, they eventually got to their cruise altitude and they're good to go. So this is not I'm going to Mexico and do drugs with Navy SEALs for a weekend like I initially thought. Man, this was one of the most challenging things I've ever done. But on the other side of one of the most challenging things I've ever done is everything I've been seeking for the majority of my life, and the ability to shed so much trauma and drugs and alcohol and everything that I was carrying around. I still have bad days, but my current bad days, I'm not in it. And everybody else was going to be in it with me. I'm outside of it. I'll look at it and be like, Whiz, bad day, man, not bad life. Old Whiz, bad day, bad life, everything's awful. So it's really helped me, with my quote current bad days. And I can look back and go, wow, before Medicine Whiz, he would not be in a good place right now. Now I just kind of smile a little bit. So absolutely transformative, but not for everyone, period. And I got to be clear about that.
No. Again, I think that's very important caveat to put in there. And again, I just think it's great to make something that is worth the work ultimately on the other side of it that you're able to find, and many people like you are able to find sort of that ability to step back and kind of separate themselves from past bad patterns of thinking and things like that,
Yeah.
and be able to kind of overcome it, which is huge. So in terms of
the generational trauma of a suicide, it's a hand grenade. Let me share with you just a quick story. Daniel Carcillo and I were at the beach club down here in Boca. I'd recently met him, so we're getting to become buddies. But my wife and my kids, when I was helping run a trading firm in Chicago, they became Blackhawks fans. And Daniel, that was the time of Carcillo and 2-time Stanley Cup champ. So I texted my wife. I'm like, yeah, I'm at the beach club with Daniel Carcillo. She's like, oh my God, don't go anywhere. I'm grabbing the kids. We're coming over and we're going to pretend to bump into you. I'm like, he's pretty cool. I think he's going to be okay. But they came, right? And it was funny because it was like the Sound of Music. I'm like sitting at the head of this table, and then my wife Susie, my son Matthew, then Jack and Keely were all arranged on this side, and he was sitting on the other side on this couch. And we were still talking medicine stuff, and because they were just kind of enthralled with sitting across from Daniel Carcillo. And I'll never forget this moment. He stopped and he looked over to them and he said, well, how's your dad now? And I had I had a 3-second moment of terror. Like by the time that those words like went over to them, I was actually a little scared. And they were all quiet. And I'm like, oh my God, man, you know, and leave it to my brave Princess Keely. Finally, she's the one that spoke, and she looked at me and she said, he's better. And I tear up even now because you know, I didn't, you never know how bad things are or whatever it is because you're you, but to see my daughter and my family kind of look at me, they were all kind of smiling, but I'm like, is anybody going to say anything? And she just said, he's better. Man. Thank God I'm here. There was times when I was close to checking out, and seeing their faces and my bride's face kept me here. But the healing, what did that do to society? I just told you I still have my bad days, but when I look before medicine, Whiz, I am a 1,000,000% better father, husband, and human being. What impact does that have on this planet, man? And people kind of chuckle when I say this, is because they haven't had this experience. I'm not joking when I say, if I got Vladimir Putin, Zelensky, Netanyahu, and the mullah, whatever his name is, and they did an Ibogaine retreat, this isn't a joke, there would be no war. And don't laugh at me. Listen to Rick Doblin. Rick Doblin was on Rogan recently, excuse me, and he said, you want to get blown away? We took IDF veterans, combat veterans, versus Hezbollah, Hamas. These people saw some shit. We got Hezbollah and Hamas, former terrorists. They did a retreat, folks. These people who would cut each other's throats, literally, not figuratively, and they healed together. On the other side of the medicine, these people are best friends. Rick tried to bring them to psychedelic science. The US wouldn't let in the former terrorist guys. They were going to get on stage at psychedelic science and say, man, it doesn't get any hatred than who we used to be, and these medicines helped us heal. So that's when I told you I stopped going to DC because it's swampy, but one of the main reasons, in my personal opinion, these medicines remain a Schedule 1 is because they can turn warriors into peacemakers. The MIC, the military industrial complex, needs robots, man. I have seen meat-eating, knuckle-dragging killers, SEALs, Green Berets, Delta, Marines. I've seen these men on the other side of the medicine horrified. They're healed, but they're like, I can't even believe I was capable of that, or I did that. They clean up that moral injury. I mean, to a person, they'll tell me, like, Wiz, trust me, I remember how to be violent. So somebody breaks into my house or you attack me or my family, I can remember. But other than that, they see, like I do. I see souls now. I used to see shells. I used to see race, sex, nationality, flag. That's gone, man. I see souls, and this shell, this ego. That's the problem. That's how we get to wars and everything like that. But it was incredible. Maybe Rick worked some magic, but when I heard him say that, I'm like, I knew that. People joke, laugh when I say Putin and Zelensky. I'm like, it's not funny. I guarantee you in 72 hours, there would at least be a ceasefire, if not absolute peace. These guys, they would see each other for who they truly are. one of the things that I'll take with to until I transition and be with God again is when God healed me on the medicine and looked at me and said, Matthew, I don't make imperfect things. I can help you with this, the crap, but always remember who you truly are. And that's what these medicines can do, is just take a hammer and a spike and knock this shell to the ground and show everybody on that retreat who we truly are.
Yeah, so it really strips away sort of everything else and really finds the connection and the connection ultimately between different people, between, I'm sure, nature, all those things. Super important. And again, I do think for people who have suffered through seeing really horrific things, being able to find that peace and sort of connection again, I think has to be, because I think that is, from what I understand, a big thing that veterans struggle with is not a lot of people understanding kind of the things that they've been through and not being able to connect in the same ways, and being able to be on the other side of that refined community, refined connection, I imagine is hugely important. Again, I think a ton of fantastic work that you are working on. I do very much appreciate you taking the time to kind of share the story, to share the work that you're working on, because again, I think very, very important. And I do think sort of psychedelic medicine, like we've been talking about, has seen much more attention and focus and even drive towards potentially some progress, which would be great to see across the board. Would love to know, how can people get involved, help, contribute, follow along, find more information? How can they kind of get aligned with some of the work that you're working on? Would love to hear that. Oh, wait, you're muted. Sorry.
Yeah, a good catch. Absolutely. Go to nofallenheroes.com or check out our social media, our Instagram, No Fallen Heroes. The number, I have to talk like a chairman of a foundation. We need donations. We need money. We talked at the beginning, 7 to 10 grand for ibogaine. I mean, are you insane? Let me lead with this though, real quick. Some people ask me like, hey, what's your 3 to 5 year strategy for the foundation? You ready? To not be existing. I should not be doing this. I want the No Fallen Heroes Foundation in 3 to 5 years to not exist. I mean, maybe we can shift our mission to helping kids or something like of these. So what I'm getting at is I shouldn't have to do this. The VA should live up to its promises of healing those that have borne the scars of service. So step one, I want to go away. Don't want to do this. Shouldn't be doing this. I want to retire, go skiing, and do all sorts of stuff. The government needs to step up and heal our heroes. Nonprofits should not be doing this work. Now, until the VA steps up and really gets us going, we're going to have to keep doing this. We need donations, folks. Anything helps at this point. Sadly, 3 or 4 months ago with the potential trade wars and all sorts of stuff, man, our donations dried up as the market imploded. That's kind of what happens to nonprofits. So we're kind of on fumes right now, and it's sad because I'll tell you what, Mackenzie, when I wake up in the morning, I almost don't want to look at my phone because I get an email anytime somebody fills out a grant request. I haven't read one of these that doesn't make me tear up or cry. These are young men, women, or older men. I have Vietnam era veterans reaching out like, I can't believe,
Wow.
these things are actually illegal now, or I could maybe get access to healing. And I hate talking like this. We're kind of a victim of our own success. What do I mean by that? I call it the world's greatest Ponzi scheme. You go and heal, you get home, you want to tell everybody, I want to bring people on a retreat. I want to help. When you get on an airliner, what's the flight attendant tell you? If we lose pressurization, put the mask on you first, because you're not good to anybody else if you're not. So once these folks put the mask on themselves, they get home, they're like, yay, everything's great. You come join me. So the more healing work we do, the actual word gets out, the more grant requests we get, the less money we technically have. And we already talked about the economics of it. Like, man, I gotta budget let's do more psilocybin at home than ibogaine. So long answer to your short question, we need donations, folks. Whatever your Starbucks budget is for the month, if you could just go on nofallenheroes.com and make that your monthly, it obviously helps. We have a really cool resource. We have our own fighter jet. If you might make a nice donation, we'll go up and you'll get your fighter pilot for a day experience. We'll turn you into Maverick and go pull some G's and see if you can fight the G-forces and stay awake and not pass out. So, and then the other thing is just kind of spreading our content. If you go on the No Fallen Heroes Instagram, for example, share our clips of heroes healing, because the first psychedelic revolution, I love my hippies and all that stuff, but I don't think Ram Dass and Timothy O'Leary, hey, let's put LSD in the water. I don't think that went over too well with the American public. This psychedelic, I don't think I'm anybody special. Marcus Luttrell will tell you. But if regular mom and pop walking down the street can look at a veteran and go, wow, well, if they healed with these medicines, maybe what Uncle Sam has been telling me for decades was a lie. I mean, wouldn't that be shocking that the government lied to you about something? The government always labels things the exact opposite of what it is. The Inflation Reduction Act caused inflation. Schedule I drugs, these medicines, they're actually not. Alcohol and tobacco are. So getting our content out and kind of spreading the word of our mission helps regular people go, wow, I thought this was for hippies. And if you did this medicine, you jump off your roof or something like that, or you'll peel your skin off. Yeah. Getting our stories out to people saying, hey, man, I reconnected with my faith, my father, my sister. I healed my child's sexual abuse, and I healed decades of trauma in 14 hours. And Lisa, I'm a complete liar. This actually happened. And the more people hear about that story, maybe, and one last thing, Mackenzie, is I remind people, this isn't coming from them down. This truly is a we the people moment. This is coming from us up. Some of these lawmakers are like, whoa, I can't, I'm anti-drug and anti-criminal, and they need cover. Our leaders, imagine that. They're not leading. They're not leaders. They're politicians. They need cover. So the more of we the people that can reach out to your local congressman and go, where do you stand on psychedelics for veterans? That can only help our mission. Mackenzie, I've met the most anti-drug, pro-law and order Republican on the planet, and after I give them my 5 to 10 minute pitch, they're like, why aren't we doing this? So if we can get I saw a funny wasn't a funny headline. I laughed at it because it was like 2 years ago. It was like AOC and Dan Crenshaw, and I didn't want to read the rest of the headline. Like what? Killed each other or got into a fist fight? Agree on psychedelic therapy for veterans. I'm like, whoa, if we can get the barbell agreeing, what are we waiting for? But again, back to that congressman, follow the money. There's no money in healing. And the alcohol, the tobacco folks, the big pharma folks, they're a thing because they're a thing, folks. That's why I can't stand going to DC. As soon as I go inside the Beltway, I just kind of get weighed down a little bit by the funk. But this is a we the people moment. So long answer to your short question, just help us raise awareness. If you can't donate, I send some love, but also just spread the word out, man, because the more Americans that we're leading this charge, not our politicians.
No, I think that's a great point on both fronts. I think, being able to make sure it's in front of your own representatives that you are saying, hey, this is something that I'm interested in. Where do you stand on it? What are you doing to kind of advance it? Super important. But of course, honestly, the donating element, supporting the people who are doing the work obviously makes a big difference. I'll definitely share links on socials so people can find it. And I think we'll probably do one ourselves just to kind of help support the mission there.
Thank you.
I see Noah in the comments. He was mentioning the fighter jet. How nice does the donation have to be to get that cool experience? I think he's asking.
Yeah, so I'll just tell you the math publicly. It's $3,000 per flight hour just to operate the airplane, and we'd like to send somebody to Mexico for about $7. So we strongly, if minimum donation around 10, that would really help out.
There you go. All right,
and this is, I mean, we've auctioned that jet right off. We've gotten as high as 100,000 before. We've gotten up in Aspen, average donations about 30, 35, but the bare minimum experience is that. The jet's currently out in Aspen because we're actually doing the flyby to open the 4th of July parade. So the jet's out there, and it's just too hot down here in the summer in South Florida to fly that thing. So we take it up to the mountains. So if you'd like to go see some snow-capped mountains and then go down low level, down some rivers, you can donate, and we'll meet you out in Colorado.
That's fantastic. Getting a very cool, unique experience while also knowing that you're, spending money, spending time to
Yeah.
make lives better. For
We call it
veterans.
a flight to fight veteran suicide.
That's
Yeah,
fantastic.
we're a 501c3. It's 100% tax write off, and you're putting the ladder down to help save and change a life.
That's
And yeah,
fantastic.
you join a sorority, a fraternity that has 0.001% of humans in it. Only 0.001% of humans have ever flown in a fighter jet before. So that if you want to sound cool at a cocktail party, this is the way to do it. And we have GoPro mounts in the back, so you're going to have an
Ooh.
HD video of the whole thing. It's really cool.
That is very, very awesome. All right, neat. Anyone who's out there and interested, definitely take a look. Again, I will definitely share the links, and I think we'll do a donation as well. So, Wiz, thanks for taking the time. Really appreciate it. I know there's been a lot of focus on psychedelic medicine lately. It feels like things are turning, which is great. So, really important to have this conversation today. So, really appreciate the time.
Amen.
Everyone, thanks so much for joining. We really appreciate it as well. Hope you found this interesting, and we will catch you on the next one. Thanks so much again. Really appreciate it. Thanks.
Before investing, carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses found in the prospectus, available at AdvisorShares.com.